welcome to Materialize, a new-ish podcast about game design and making board games and things related to that. I'm Eris, and I am joined this week by Ryan and Tegan. Ryan, welcome to the show. Who are you? What's your bit of your background?
I'm a game designer that's primarily got a lot of product management and other business experience, and looking to learn more about how everybody else is doing game design.
Wonderful. Tegan, what's
Hi.
your background? Hello.
So I work in strategic communication. I have a background as a research scientist, and I dabble in game design.
So I am a graphic designer by trade, as some people might say. I've been doing that for a very long time. So this week we are going to be talking about heading to a convention in Australia. This one's called PAX Australia, but I guess the topics or the themes can apply to many different conventions. I might just do a quick little synopsis of what PAX Australia is from my perspective. The PAX name is from Penny Arcade, which was a website, webcomic type thing, and then the X is for Expo. And it is a huge event in the Australian game scene. I think it might be the biggest one that we have in Australia right now, although I know there are some other ones that are popping up which might be rivaling it. And it's a very large player-focused event, so dominated by video games. It's like most of the space is video game focused, but they have about a third of the venue which is tabletop game focused. There is a large playing area, free play area, which has a board game library and people can bring their own games. And I think it used to seat around 1,000, so I'm assuming it still seats about 1,000 people, which is pretty immense when you first walk in and see 1,000 people playing board games. And there's obviously like retail stalls and people selling things. There also has panels and talks going on in different rooms at the convention center, so you can go and hear people talk about different things. They have comedians doing stuff. They have a whole bunch of events. I've honestly never been to so many things because I'm always doing other things. It's such a chaotic time. What do you folks know about PAX?
I think it's going to be a pretty different experience for me because this is my first PAX. I haven't been before, so I only sort of know what I've heard. My experience with board game conventions really are limited to CanCon and BorderCon, which are very, very different things. This is a whole nother beast from my understanding. So definitely looking forward to it. I'm only going to be there from lunchtime Friday through to the Sunday, so I feel like I'm going to try and squeeze a lot into a small amount of time. Definitely intending to want to come back other years to take it a bit more casually, to just sort of check out some of the other areas. I don't imagine I'll stray too far from the board gaming areas on this visit.
Yeah, wow. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah, it's brand new for me. I've never been to PAX, and I was originally planning on going as an attendee, and through a little bit of advice got suggested to apply to showcase a game I'm working on and got accepted. So I'm in the deep end at this point, feeling like I really don't know what I've signed up for. I'm really excited to hear what other people are, what their plans are, how to get stuff out of it, and just kind of figure out more explicitly like what it is, what to expect.
Yeah, so all three of us, part of the reason we're doing this episode is that we all got accepted into that showcase area. So for the Australian PAX, the organisers, in partnership with the Tabletop Game Designers Australia group, who are a non-profit group that support the industry here in Australia, they partnered together and they have a area called, now this is where we have not disagreement, we have perspectives on how to say it. I say it as collaboratory, but how do you say it, either of you?
I don't know if it's correctly, but I say collaboratory.
Yeah, I say the same, collaboratory.
It sounds nicer, but I think mine sounds more awkward, so therefore it's better. So they matched these two words together. But they've been running it since about 2017 from memory, and it's really good. They basically offer local designers table space, usually 2 sessions of about 4 hours, and you get to demo and showcase your prototype to an audience. It's definitely prototype focused. You're not allowed to demo a published game or a game that's currently on Kickstarter or anything like that. So it has to be something that's still in active development. And it's honestly such a good thing. So aside from the 2 sessions and the space, they also give everyone who gets a spot 2 passes to the event, so you can have you and a helper work the event. And that alone is like such a big like financial saving, because it means you don't need to buy a ticket. And most people might be aware, if you're listening to this podcast, that making board games, most of us are doing it as a side thing and it's not our main thing. And so money isn't always available, and trying to cut costs where we can is good. They also do some other things that they've been running now for a couple of years, which are more similar to what they do for videos. A thing called Indie Showcase, which is where people have got something that's actually shipped or very close to shipping, and they're showcasing that game. It's a bit more like a booth. And I'm not sure, there might be a third thing that they do, but I've just now forgotten what it is.
I
PAX
think it's PAX.
Rising.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking
Rising,
of.
yeah, and that one I'm a bit unsure about I'm not totally sure what Rising is, because I think I missed PAX last year, and I'm not sure if, so I don't really know what that. Do you know what that is at all, or
I just know the term.
just know the name? Yeah, yeah.
According to the
So
website, it showcases engaging games developed by smaller teams. And so, yeah, it's a little unclear how much PAX Rising differs from the Indie Showcase.
okay, yeah, I don't know. I know that in the past I found the Indie Showcase, because before they started putting tabletop games in, it was just video games. But it was really cool going and chatting to the developers, who often was their first or second game. Like, they're really young developers, and just seeing these products that they were working on, and these creations. And so I look forward to seeing it for tabletop as well. So, yeah, the
So
one thing that, like, yeah, sorry, you go.
I was going to ask, because you mentioned sort of those different aspects of it. You've been going to PAX for a number of years, right, Eris? So
Yeah,
have you seen
yeah,
how the tabletop part is sort of
yes,
growing into sort of encroaching more of the
yeah.
space?
Yeah, so my first one was 2014, which I think was the second PAX Australia. So 2013 was the first one ever. And apparently everyone that went said it was great but terrible at the same time, because they were at a venue which had a lot of outdoor areas, and it was like pouring with rain. So it got really muddy and just impractical. But since then, they've been at the main Melbourne Convention Centre, which is a really lovely, huge venue. My experience of it is that it definitely has gotten bigger. It already had a really big tabletop section. So, like I said, it was roughly a third of the main exhibition hall. It was the whole last section of that was tabletop, and usually has been that. It might move occasionally, but it's usually that last section, and really big. And it's gotten bigger because they've added in the collaboratory. They've added in, I think it's a bit more booth space. The main tabletop free play area has been big for a number of years. It might not have started at about 1,000, but it's definitely been around the 1,000 seating capacity for a number of years. And it's so loud. It's surprising how loud board games can be when there's like 1,000 people doing it. So yeah, but it's a good mix. Like, usually the booths that they have there are people who are doing tabletop related stuff as well. So it's either people who are publishing games, or like people who have um, are selling like dice or bags or things that like people who play games might want to do, as well as actual board game retailers. There's a whole bunch of them who have shops there and are selling their board games and selling just normal board games.
Do you know
Yeah.
much about? I know they also apparently run tournaments
Yep.
for some of the games, and
Yep.
I don't know how big of a thing is. I've heard that there's a whole bunch of cosplay stuff that also happens, but I don't know how big
Yeah,
that is
yeah. So
compared to the.
if you've ever seen any videos of any of the PAX events or similar events from the US, where there's a lot of cosplayers, that's pretty typical as well. A lot turn out for these as well. I don't know if they probably do have some kind of cosplay like award thing. I've never been a part of it, so I don't know for a fact. But there's definitely a lot of people cosplaying. That's absolutely common. They also have a beanbag area, which was a bit of a chill out area, so slightly quieter, had some kind of wall baffle things up. It still wasn't totally quiet because the nature of the hall, but it meant that people could just sit down and chill out for a bit if they're a bit overwhelmed by everything. There was also a couple of rooms that you could go to, like which were like at a different level, which were quieter and remote, which would have different focuses. So like one of them was sort of like a queer friendly space, so people could go there and just chill out. And then another one was a bit more like another kind of quiet space. So I don't know exactly if all of these are still around, and I guess it depends on who's volunteering and doing things. But there was a lot of opportunity for stuff. The tournaments, there definitely are. Some of them, it depends. It's usually your bigger, like your card games, like your trading card games and things like that. There's also a thing where if you go around to different sections and perform a certain task, if you complete the tasks, you get a pin, like a penny arcade, like an actual, like a little enamel pin. But you can only get them by doing whatever the task is that store or that place wants. And so I worked the Rule and Make booth, who was a board game publisher for 3 years, and so we would have people come who wanted the Rule and Make pin, and they'd have to do whatever, and if they did it, then they'd get a pin. And these pins aren't for sale. So if people have them, it's because they've done all the relevant tasks for their thing. So like there's a bunch of stuff, and I'm guaranteed I'm missing things. So like it's so dense with activity and like programming and whatever. I've been on one panel, so that was a good experience and different. And I've been to a few panels, but usually most of my time is spent just in the tabletop area, playing games, hanging out with game designers. Yeah, that's sort of my experience.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be, like I say, very busy. I know you mentioned the collaboratory is 2 4-hour sessions. So mine are both back to back on the Saturday. So I think I'm 10:30 to 2:30 and then 3 to 7. So it feels like that day is going to be going to be essentially a write-off in that regard, because it's going to be a big day as it is. And so then
I'm on Friday,
afternoon on the Friday. So Sunday I might hopefully have some time to get some games played.
Yeah, it's funny. Like this year, they've put everyone back to back, and it sort of makes sense in the sense that you just set your table up, and I suppose you don't have to you save some time and stuff. But my experience from previous years was that your sessions were not next to each other.
Be pretty exhausting.
But it's going to be interesting. So yeah, because I'm on Friday all day, so I've got the back to back Friday ones. I don't know when you are. Are you on Friday as well, Ryan? Or
no, I'm actually split. I've got one session on Friday and another session on Saturday.
Ah, nice. That's good, because I think when we looked originally at the list when it was released, I think everyone was. Did that just come through recently? Did they change it?
No, I was always on 2 different days, but from some of the other people I had talked to, they had what was in the email versus what was in the published schedule was different. So mine was actually the same though. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
Not to self-promote too much, but you can find me on table 5 on Friday, and you can find me on where's the other one? Table 5 on Saturday.
So what's the game that you're playing there, Ryan?
It's a game that I'm currently calling Wild Cross. It's a set collection duel type game. It's an abstract game and meant to be more of a casual kind of a filler style game that you can play basically a whole game in about 20, maybe 30 minutes max.
Great.
Nice.
Well, I just quickly found my email. I'm on table 10.
The same thing. Oh, cool.
Table 10 on the Saturday, pretty much all day Saturday. Yep. I'm bringing a game that I've had shelved for a number of years, really. So I've got to sort of dust it off and reacquaint myself with how to play it. I play tested a lot pre-COVID and then have not so much in the last sort of couple of years. So it's a disc flicking worker placement game. So a combination of dexterity and strategy called Jump to Jupiter, where you're flicking your discs or your ships and you're flicking it to try and land on planets and try and build your fleet and build colonies on the moons of Jupiter.
Yeah, I got to play it one time and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Ryan.
I was just going to ask, how do you guys see the difference between demoing a game versus playtesting a game? Because especially when it's not a ready to be published kind of state, I'm not sure how you guys.
Playtesting is probably the appropriate terminology in this situation.
It's definitely nebulous. The thing about doing collaboratory, I'll try and say it the right way. The thing about collaboratory, which is probably different from a regular playtesting event, like if you're going to a playtesting group that maybe happens in your area, this is predominantly people who are just the general public. So yes, it's all signed saying that, hey, these are prototypes or these are like in development games, or I don't know the exact wording, but that doesn't mean that the person who sits down at the table necessarily understands what that means. So it's often better to treat it more like a demo, in the sense of you're just trying to let them learn the rules as quickly as possible, get them into the game, hold their hand as much as they need, that kind of stuff. And then for me, the playtesting brain is more in just observation. So everyone's going to have a different answer. Other designers do it differently. Me, I don't really do questionnaires afterwards. I sort of just let people play, and then if they want to talk about it, they will, and if they just want to move on, because the other thing is they're also busy. They're probably going to be going to a panel or wanting to see some other kind of event or whatever happening. I just kind of treat it more observationally. I've definitely been playtested there with other people's games when they've had some kind of survey or they've done a bit of a Q&A at the end, and there's no right or wrong way. The point is more that the audience here is largely normal gamers, or like not even always gamers. They're just people who are interested in something and they come along, they might try out the game. I've definitely had the good but also bad experience happen where people play it and go, oh, where can I buy this? And you're like, well, this game may never exist in the real world. It might be the closest it ever comes to you playing it. So I don't know. But that's a good feeling when it happens, because obviously it meant that they enjoyed it.
They ask that
So-
louder where
Yeah.
a publisher can hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
How long do most people normally stop and want to engage with the thing? Is it like you got 5 minutes to make your mark on them, or do a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm happy to sit down for 45 minutes?
Unless they've changed it, it's pretty much next door to where the tabletop free play area is. So generally, you're going to have people who are already in that area because they have some interest in tabletop games. Oftentimes, you can have a little sign on your table, look at A4 and A3 sign on the table that may say how many players, playtime, like estimated playtime. It just can help. But obviously, if someone comes along and they've got questions, then you can just say, hey, like this is probably going to take, 60 minutes or 45 minutes or whatever. And then they've got that choice about if they have time for it or not. So it really just varies. You do get definitely people coming along who'll ask you a question and then go, oh, not right now. And then they might come back later after they've gotten lunch or they've gotten whatever they're doing. I've found it such a good experience, both from being able to play other people's games, because I'd end up spending so much of my time just going around to other tables and playing other designers' games, because a lot of these people are interstate, people who I don't get to see very often. So it's a good opportunity to try out their games and see what's happening. And also people playing my games. It's just generally positive. I've had not very many negative experiences, and most of them would be what I would call normal negative experiences, in the sense that someone just didn't like a game or I really didn't like the game. But actually one designer, we ended up having a huge heated discussion about their game because I did not enjoy it at all, and they wanted to unpack that. But we're now really good friends. So it's just, you never know what's going to happen and how things can work out. I'm just going to say, because you both did it and I looked at the email, I'm on table 9 on Friday, the 6th of October. We didn't even say when PAX was. PAX is, the 6th, 7th, 8th October. We're going to have to talk about DevCon as well, so we'll have to remember to talk about that in a moment too. You were going to say something there, Ryan?
I was just reflecting on the fact that the way that you and I actually met was I play tested your game and gave you some very negative feedback.
You did.
And you haven't kicked me out yet, so that's a plus.
And then I said, "Do you want to be Facebook friends?"
Yeah.
Because that's how you respond. That's how you respond to playtesters who are difficult, right? That you just befriend them. It doesn't work that way all the time, but that was a funny story. You're right. But your feedback to me, I feel, was way more mild than the feedback I gave this designer, both because I was less experienced at giving feedback, so I was exhausted from the event, so my threshold was low. And probably I was just rude. Like, that's probably a part of it as well.
So, Eris, you told us your table number and date, but did you describe the game that you're going to be playtesting?
Yeah, so I'm doing a game which is called For God's Sake. I've been working on it. Depends on how you define working on it. The core idea for about 9 years, but this iteration for about 18 months. It's a card drafting, card passing, set collection, sort of engine building, casual game. It's become lighter and more casual as things have gone on. I made it more meaty, but then I got a lot of very constructive feedback from people who I trust, and they said to simplify it again and that I'd made it too complicated. So I've done that. So I'm still trying to find that middle ground, though, because there is a part of me that wonders if I've now simplified it too much. But I feel also that for the audience who I'm trying to aim it at, which is a casual non-gamer audience, that possibly the simpler version is better. But but I'm very happy with it, and it's been getting very good feedback consistently now. So I feel like it's ready to move on. But yeah,
I think I've played that one at the last 2 BorderCons. Look forward to seeing how it's iterated.
You played it, yeah. Just a BorderCon last year, I took a non-themed, like I just had some cards I made up with just some generic suits on them, and it kind of resurrected this design, which, like I said, I've been working on the core idea for so long. Like, it was 2014 when I came up with the core drafting system, and that's not changed much since then, but everything around it's changed, and I'm pretty happy with it. And I think it's kind of one of those things where I'm at that stage of the process which I don't enjoy, which is writing the rule book. And so I've been just delayed on that part now for too long. I need to get the rule book written. So that's actually my biggest thing I need, because I really want to try and get a nicer prototype printed, but I'm worried I've left it too late now because it's only about 4 weeks or 3 weeks to at PAX now. So I really feel like I've got to get the files sent to the printer soon if I'm going to have any chance of getting them back in time for the event. So I may be having to do a home created prototype. Who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got one that I'm trying to get ready for pitching. That is just a home created prototype, just Officeworks printing. Although I did just today in the mail from Amazon, I got my new guillotine, A4 guillotine, and a
Nice.
corner curvy punch for
Oh,
the
yeah.
corners of my cards, so that I'll be able to make it at least a little bit nicer now that I've got
Yeah. Oh, I think that's so, like, having the corner cutter. I definitely need to invest in one, because I think you're right. It's a good thing to have. So the other part of the PAX experience for us here in Australia is DevCon, which is organised by the Tabletop Game Designers Australia, and it is the Thursday evening or afternoon evening before the main PAX event. It's not officially part of PAX. I think it is part of the Games Week for Victoria, the Victorian Games Week, which incorporates video games and other stuff. They've got a whole host of events that people can sign up for if they want to. And DevCon is it's probably, and I know, Tegan, you said you're not going to be there, so I'm really sorry. I'm not trying to make you feel like extra sad. But for me, it's probably like 30 to 40% of what makes PAX a valuable thing to go to. Maybe not have, maybe 20 to 5. Let's say 25%. We'll just quarter. But the reason is that not only is it a really good opportunity to catch up with all these designers from around Australia who you only really see once or twice a year, but the event itself, they have a lot of playtesting time, so you can just grab a table, grab some people and playtest your game and playtest other people's games. They also have some talks, which are really good. So, like, they're often relevant to what people have requested topics to be talked about. I spoke at one back a few years ago, and it was nerve-wracking because I'm not great at public speaking, but it was an experience. It was good. I mean, obviously, if you just want to keep playing your game, then you might go, I don't want to hear all these talks. I just want to do playtesting or play other people's games, and that's fine. That can happen. Like, as in, that you just got to accept that no, there's talks and they've got to listen. But they've been good. I've definitely learned stuff from each of them and found it interesting, and just the opportunity just to catch up with all these designers from interstate. But yeah, it's a really good experience. So I highly recommend, if anyone is going to go along either this year or next year or in the future, that you try and get a ticket for DevCon. I think the way I found the tickets was through the TGDA's Facebook group. They had a link, but the actual tickets are on, I think, Eventbrite. So it was pretty easy to get. And
It looked like it was pretty affordable too. It was only $15 or something like that.
yeah, I think this year I might have splurged, and I think I paid for one of the sponsorship levels just because I wanted to support the event. Things I think was like $50 or something. It's not like a lot of money to help make it happen. I think they had a higher tier, which was more money, which was out of my budget. But yeah, they've tried to make it affordable. It's really good. I think they might even also offer a couple of scholarship spots where, like, people who need help can ask for that and get assistance, which is really good. So it's definitely worth trying to talk to somebody about or go along to if you can. Yeah.
Eris, I'm just curious, as somebody who's both never been to PAX and never been to DevCon, you obviously know a lot of people, and so to some extent you're just reconnecting with people that you know. I've heard other people also suggest that DevCon's like the place to be to meet everybody. I guess I'm just kind of curious. It's gonna be difficult to know who to meet and how to meet people and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff. Any
and
tips
I think,
on?
yeah, I'm a bit socially awkward. I have social anxiety. I try and be extroverted when I can, but it's still not always easy. I think for me, the way I've tend to approach it now is sort of similar to how I approach going to a party, where don't necessarily know everybody. And I'll be honest, I don't go to very many parties. This doesn't happen very often, but I kind of just sort of see what happens. And so, like, I don't really target necessarily to try and deliberately meet people or talk to them. Obviously, if I see friends, I'll try and catch up with them, people I already know. But if it's other people, if it's people I don't know, we're just going to see. And how that manifests for me at these events is playtesting. So normally people are wanting to playtest their games. And so I can go along, join a table, and suddenly I'm now meeting 4 people who I've never met before, probably. And I'm now in a game for who knows how long, with them. So and I've met a lot of people at the DevCon events. Yeah, because 2014 the DevCon didn't exist, but we all met at a local game store through TGDA. They'd organised an unofficial get-together, and so tons of people just turned up at a local game store and played on the Thursday evening, and then it's now grown into an actual event. But again, same kind of thing where it's just you just sit down and play at a table and meet people, and maybe you add them on Facebook as a friend. Who knows?
Yeah, I was really hoping to be able to get along, but I unfortunately couldn't get to Melbourne till the Friday. I just couldn't get down on the Thursday this year, so devastated to miss out. But I'll definitely try to make the arrangements sooner and be able to get down there on the Thursday next year.
Oh, it's such a huge thing. In terms of what you're saying, though, about meeting people and stuff, like, DevCon is really good, and I don't want to oversell. Like, it is just like any other big group event. You don't get to talk to everybody. It's packed. You only really, you're naturally only going to limit on who you can talk to. But because of the talks, you can meet people and playtesting. But you're going to be in the collaboratory area. Similar thing will happen there. So many of the same people are playtesting, demoing their games. So you can just go around and meet and greet and say hi and see what's happening. And so I think you still get a lot of similar benefits.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to just slightly different environment.
I know you won't be able to be there, Tegan, but since you mentioned a couple other events you've been to, like BorderCon and stuff, how have you approached like meeting other designers at different events?
Yeah, so I go along to BorderCon and CanCon are the main two that I tend to go to. I've been going to CanCon for many years, better part of a decade. Although I really only get into the game design side from about 2018, 2019. And I don't know, I'm a networky sort of person. I like meeting people, and it's like breaking the ice and having convos and meeting different people. It sits well with me, just my personality and my sort of approach. So I guess I don't really think too hard about it. Just introduce it. And I think, as Eris says, though, with board games, not just with game design, with board gaming in general, it's so useful having a centerpiece to talk about in the first instance. You can sort of get past the small talk really quickly because you've got something to talk about, which is the game in front of you, whether it's game designers testing a prototype or just at a game meetup, just with people you don't know. I find it's a very easy way to make friends and connections is over board games.
It's very different. Like the other player-focused events, you just don't have as many other board game designers there. CanCon probably would be the closest that I know of that we have on a national scale where people are traveling from other states to go to, but it still is considerably smaller than who turn up for PAX.
I was just going to flag, since you mentioned that the other events are smaller, like I was surprised when I realized that PAX is expected to have over 80,000 people. And so by comparison, most of the other gaming events I've seen are like 1,000, maybe 2,000 people max kind of thing. And
if you're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was like when you say it's relatively small, it's like talking about orders of magnitude smaller. And so I just wanted to, like, I was surprised that PAX is that big.
Well, like BorderCon, I think, is capped at around 200 people.
Yeah.
And CanCon, I'm not quite sure. The board game area of CanCon, do you know roughly how many?
Oh, off the top of my head, I feel like I should. It's certainly in the hundreds for the board game area. And I think CanCon overall gets thousands. But but I mean, not 80,000. Like 1,000, maybe.
Is it really 80,000 for PAX? That blows my mind. I mean, it's believable because it's packed.
That was the number that I saw referenced for last year's PAX.
Yeah, right. And they're all sold out already. They sold out of the 3-day badges, and I heard the Saturday badges just sold out just recently. The 3-day badges were sold out even before the collaboratory results were announced, because I remember thinking, well, I'm not going unless I'm getting my spot at collaboratory.
And this is the other thing. So we're going to talk about tips for designers who want to go. People who have the finances and are organised, the wise thing to do is to buy your PAX tickets like everyone else ahead of time, and then because the applications for a collaboratory don't come out till much later. So the smart thing would be buy a PAX ticket normally, and then if you get into collaboratory and you do have the tickets supplied from that, you can then return your tickets to PAX, the ones that you paid for. I now just kind of roll the dice and I don't buy a ticket ahead of time, and I hope I can get one. But I also worked a booth for 3 years, so I kind of got used to just having the exhibitor pass. And the other thing is with collaboratory, I also do a thing where, like, if I don't get in, then I will be contacting all of my friends who did get in and go, hey, do you need someone to help you demo your game? I'm more than happy to help you demo your game and take that ticket. events. And so, and a lot of people are similar to like where I'm in right now, where I'm looking for someone to help me demo. So it can work, like it can make it happen.
Mm.
Yeah.
The other big one that's coming is South by Southwest, right? Is having its first ever Sydney one.
Yeah.
That's going to be pretty big from what
Yeah,
I'm...
again, off the back of some prodding from a few other people's suggestions, I went ahead and submitted a game for that as well. They haven't made final decisions, even though they said they were going to, but I still have my fingers crossed on that one.
That one baffles me because someone told me that a normal ticket costs like more than $1,000 or something. Like if you're going to it.
So you gotta keep in mind what South by Southwest is in the U.S. It's it would make PAX look like one of those like
Yeah.
OrderCon looks like to other things, right? It's the first time it's an international like hosted thing. It's always been in Austin for ages and ages. It's gaming, music,
Sorry,
and
that's funny
tech.
because PAX Australia was the first international PAX. So that's funny that Australia's been the testing ground for two of them. Yeah.
It's not, yeah, I've seen that across a number of other industry events. But anyways, South by Southwest is also, it's a much bigger audience than just gaming.
It's music, film, it's like
music, film. It's also what they call interactive. And so that covers tech and business and startup space as well. And it covers a whole bunch of different spectrums. So that ticket is for a week's worth of events across all these different venues and places. Anyways, part of the reason why I also decided to put one in was because I noticed that they had a little thing where it's like, if you pay the application fee, then you're guaranteed to be able to buy a ticket at their lowest rate, which is like, I think their early bird rate was something like $700, but I think tickets now are going for $1,800.
Yeah, it's just that blows my mind. I can't, for me in my current life stage, I can't look at that and go, yeah, that's a viable expense for me to spend like $1,800 on a ticket like that. Like,
makes you think it must be a lot of industry professional, industry conferences and exhibitions and stuff. That's a pretty common sort of price for like even just scientific conferences and stuff. That's the sort of
I was gonna say it's very reasonable for a professional conference.
Interesting. Yeah. So
is there a tabletop specific part of their game showcase, or is it all part of the game show?
I must admit, when I was submitting my application, I was kind of really put off by the fact that so much of it seemed to be video game focused.
Yeah.
Even part of the thing you had to fill out was, which platforms does your game work with? Like, is this console, blah, blah. And it was like, what are the requirements enabled to showcase your game? And I was like, I need a flat space and like I couldn't remember. I was like, I think that's it. Yeah, and some chairs. I was like, this is the least resource intensive. At the same point, though, I do have digital prototypes of my game too. So I was like, well, if for some reason you want a digital version, I have these. But it just because what was interesting is that, at least from the perception I get, is they actually, and part of the reason I guess why you also pay for an application on South by Southwest is that they actually have people that will go through and do like a playthrough or demo of your game, and then use that as a judgment to be like, oh, okay, we want this in or we don't want this in, kind of thing. So it's a more involved process. I think it's pretty much a Hail Mary for me. I was like, let's see, but I don't really know what it's going to be like.
Oh, good luck with that.
Yeah, definitely. It's fascinating. And I look forward to hearing from you and anyone else that goes along. Yeah, what the experience is like. Yeah. One thing I probably want to bring up for people who haven't been to an event like PAX before, either as a designer or just in general, is just some really practical stuff that can help. And it's probably even more relevant these days than it was years ago, but it still was relevant years ago. And that's things like take disinfectant with your hand sanitizer, take wet wipes if that's your kind of thing. Obviously, if you want a mask. But anything, your throat often gets really dry from talking and stuff. So having some kind of lozenges might be helpful because it's very loud. So if you know that you don't cope with loud noises, then have a plan on how you're going to deal with that, whether it's some kind of headphones or knowing that you need to go outside and take breaks.
Is there decent food options?
Quiet lounges.
What do they do for food? Is it
Yeah, so the
chips
food
and pies, or is there?
they've got the convention center normal food, which is like, yeah, hot dogs, whatever.
Mm.
I must confess, I quite like the hot dogs there, so I've gotten them, and they've been a bit of a highlight for me each year. But they also have the different food stands and vendors doing different fancy stuff, and they might even be on the website that Ryan had access to earlier. They might even have a list of vendors, I don't
Yeah,
know.
cool.
But they did have your food truck style stuff
Mhm.
inside for some of them, so they'd have different food options outside as well. Like,
Cool.
yeah, so it wasn't too bad, but like definitely if you have dietary requirements, then maybe taking a packed lunch
Thinking about
could be
yeah.
the way to do it. But also where it is, have you either been to the Melbourne Convention Centre?
Yeah, I've been to some conferences there.
Yeah, so you'll know that it's located. There's a lot of food options within like a 5 to 10 minute walking
Yeah.
radius. Anyway, is a South
Yeah.
Bank, whatever the
South
area
Bank.
is, right
Yeah, I
there.
think so.
And then across the street at the Crown Casino, there's two different food courts there and options. So, and along the river itself, there's different
Yeah.
food options. So depending on how much time you've got to nip away, there are definitely options.
Maybe this is important for Tegan, knowing that you have a very limited amount of time. How do you prioritize, or just like it sounds like there's
Yeah.
just going to be so many things. There's even if you had 100% of the time available and
Yeah.
didn't even go to like lunch, there'd be no way to probably see
Yeah.
everything. How do you guys
My
prioritize?
plans for this one so far is to just play it by ear and not try to schedule in too much. So I've got the times that I'm on collaboratory. I've got one pitch session booked in for the Friday afternoon to pitch my storytelling trick taker game. And apart from that, I'm just gonna just wing it and just go with the flow and see where I end up, and hope I chat to some other game designers, hope I maybe play a couple of board games, and that's probably
Well,
about it.
they also have, I think it's the Friday and Saturday evening. They also have in the main exhibition. They have events like I know they've had the comedy trio tripod a few times there, and they've had other like comedians or whatever who are kind of like geek culture adjacent, or whatever,
Yeah.
who'll do stuff. And I know I've got friends who they love to go to those events and watch that. And the other big thing is panels. Like there are so many
Yeah.
panels on all these different topics. You can craft a very dense experience, or you can kind of just
Yeah.
do whatever. Like,
Exactly. That's exactly the
yeah,
sort of stuff where I don't want to look into it too much, because then I might sort of get my heart set on being at particular things at particular
yeah,
times. And I thought, no,
yeah.
if I happen to be in front of something entertaining at a time, then I'll
Well,
enjoy it. But otherwise, if I
yeah.
miss it, then I'll just catch similar things next year.
I tend to now just basically just spend time in the collaboratory area, tabletop area, and that's it. And for me, that's enough. That's the experience I want. I'm happy just to hang out, play some games, talk to people, meet people. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious with other conventions that I've been to, there's always the kind of the scheduled content that you guys are talking about in terms of the panels and stuff, but we always talk about there being the hallway track where, people try to connect and have more ad hoc conversations. I don't know how much of that is like people getting into design discussions and that kind of stuff versus just connecting. But the other thing, there's often like after parties, you'll have various companies that will put on like a open tab at a bar or have different kind of things. Are you guys aware of, I'm not sure if either of those things are typically part of
There's
PAX.
there's no, to my knowledge, and maybe I'm just not cool enough. To my knowledge, there's no tabletop focused after party that's on the weekend. I know it happens at the bigger events. Like I know it happened at Gen Con and things like that in America. And again, they're like orders of magnitude more people. Video games, there definitely is. So my video game designer friends or like video game media friends, I know that there are after parties, there are those invite only parties, there are the ones, the whoever bigwig company is like putting on, they exist, but tabletop, we're just not big enough. Like most of us are small companies, and DevCon sort of is our version of that.
Sounds like DevCon started as that in the first place. It was just people
Yeah.
A
catching up
little bit,
beforehand. Mm-hmm.
yeah. Like the pre DevCon, yeah, it was. It was just like we used to meet up. So it used to be a place called Games Lab, Games Laboratory, in the CBD, and unfortunately they are no longer there. But I think DevCon started. I'd have to double check, but it started pretty quickly. Like I reckon it was probably around 2016 it started. So
Mm-hmm.
that's our version of it. Other than that, what I've done is more unofficial ones. So like my very first pack, so when I didn't know what I was doing, it was my very first one in 2014. I had met a few people who I'd met in person, a few people who I'd met on the TGDA Facebook group. and they were some Sydney designers and some West Australia designers, and we just went out till like 3 or 4 a.m. to whatever food places were open and just kind of like hung out in Melbourne, chatting about games and having a nice night out kind of thing. I haven't quite done it that extreme because I think I learned my lesson that I'm not a party animal in that sense. I need to get to sleep. That kind of thing is more, I would say that's more likely to happen where you'll connect with whoever you want to connect to, and you might go out for dinner or go out for, go check something out smaller, or go back to someone's hotel room or whatever and play some games if you want to. But that's probably one reason why that may not happen for tabletop though is it's open really, really late. The tabletop area is open, I think, till midnight and maybe even later. And so a lot of people are happy just to hang out there and play games, and and it's well lit, and it's obviously got security and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Do you tend to get the late night Blood on the Clock Tower and Time's Up and things like that? At this one, I know some of the other board game conventions that go to the late night games tend to delve into the party games and the social games.
Absolutely. I think they used to have a massive werewolf game at PAX with, I don't even know how many people. Like, it was absolutely bonkers huge. So I'm guessing that now it'll be like Blood on the Clock Tower would probably maybe overtaking that. But yeah, they would do that. There was also some other games that do suit your bigger groups, because the other thing is you've got your role players who are around as well. So you've got like people doing role playing stuff. I'm not sure if LARPing is as big, but maybe that's just because I'm not into it that I don't know what's happening. But there might be people doing that too.
I saw that there's also an RPG focused conference, I think the early part of the same week, as well as there's GCAP, I think it's called. I forget what it stands for, but it's another games conference.
GCAP is the game. It's definitely video game focused. I've wanted to go to a GCAP, but I've never been.
It's so interesting that it's not just tied in with PAX. It's interesting.
So you said the Melbourne International Games.
No, it's because. So what is it? GCAP is Games Connect Australia Pacific, professional development and networking event. So the thing is that the Melbourne International Games Week encompasses a whole bunch of events which are disconnected, like they're independent events, but they're all part of that. So like GCAP is part of that, PAX is part of that, DevCon is part of that, but they're all totally separate events.
And role playing one might be part of that too.
Yeah, and it looks like GCAP is run by the IGEA, who are the International Games something. Man, I'm really good
at it.
There you go.
I think it's International Game Developer. Yeah.
If you are someone who is in Melbourne already, there's so much stuff in terms of Melbourne International Games Week that you could check out and go for if you wanted to. The truth is though that the tabletop related stuff is really minimal, just because we're just not big enough. We just don't have enough people doing it, or enough capital, like finances, to make it viable for everyone. And I know that that's one of our industry challenges, is how do we communicate to the funding bodies and to the governments and stuff that, hey, our industry actually is bigger than you think it is.
Or at least deserves as much support.
Yeah, it is so tricky though, right?
I'm excited to actually meet a lot more of the Melbourne designers, because everybody that I talk to seems to suggest that Melbourne's game design, from a tabletop perspective, their community is really, really strong and vibrant. Incubator and a bunch of other people all seem to be really strong there.
I actually feel oddly qualified to talk about this because I've lived I was in Melbourne for 16 years, then Sydney for 3, and now I'm in Brisbane. And I used to really believe that Melbourne absolutely was the most number of designers, like in terms of density of people there, and just the most active, like actually getting together and going to events and stuff. And Incubator was part of that. Incubator is a playtesting group. But I think when I moved to Sydney, I discovered that Sydney had a really vibrant scene too, but Sydney's scene is... I know for those who are listening to this podcast, Ryan just gave me a very perplexed face, because Ryan, you're in Sydney. And yes, so this is the lesson that I learned, and my experience is there is a lot of designers in Sydney, but the geography of Sydney makes it really hard for them to get together. So you've got these pockets all around, and it's a very big geographical area. And so they don't really get together and catch up, but there actually is quite a lot of people doing it. Canberra is obviously growing, and so I know Tegan, you're in Canberra, and like you help run a
I
playtesting group
help run
there,
the
and
LFG playtesting meetup.
yeah, and that's definitely growing. I try and keep tabs on when your events are happening and stuff. Not that I'm ever able to go, but like, and
Second
then
Saturday of every month.
yeah, I'll just fly down. I'll just drive, 12 hours or whatever, and I'll be. And then Brisbane, I'm now involved in 3 playtesting groups that are happening. 2 definitely. There's 2 monthly ones on different days of the month that are happening, and then I'm pretty confident there's a third one. But I'm learning that the Brisbane scene is really growing as well. It's not quite maybe as mature in terms of people hosting it and the events. So I think my attitude has shifted, where I used to think Melbourne was like way more than everyone else, but I think all it really was that Melbourne, through luck, fortune, planning, whatever you want to call it, geography, more people were able to actually get to this central point in the city and meet up regularly, and the other cities just haven't had that. Like, it's more difficult to make that happen.
Could be particular personalities acting as a catalyst too for those sorts of things sometimes, but with the right momentum and drive to make things happen.
And maybe because it just started, like Incubator started in 2014, so I just started making board games, and so I went to the very first one, and I think because it was pretty regular, like it was monthly, sometimes fortnightly, and then occasionally weekly. We got wild for a second there. But because it was so regular, and because it was in the CBD, and it's quite easy to get into Melbourne CBD, so it made it convenient. Whereas I think like the Sydney group, they meet on a Tuesday night, which is just like a difficult night for a lot of people to get somewhere, and nothing happens on weekends that I'm aware of.
So definitely one of the things I'm looking forward to at PAX is actually meeting in person a bunch of the people, because the other place that I do playtesting is on the TGDA online playtesting ones over Discord. There's two a month of those. So it'd be nice. Everyone there's sort of disembodied voices because we don't tend to use video on that.
Yeah.
So I, again, disappointed I won't be at DevCon, but hopefully at PAX itself, I'll get to put some faces to some of the names of the people that, they count as friends now that I've met through there and never actually interacted with in real life at this point.
I've not done one of the TGA. I'm terrible at doing the online playtest, so I've just kind of avoided it for the time being, and it's on my to-do list, but I haven't yet really dealt with it. But you do it as well, don't you, Ryan? You go along to them sometimes?
I do. I do. It's I guess twofold. Like, I've actually found that doing the digital prototyping is maybe partly because of my background, but I actually find that really easy to get going. Plus, most of my games are not overly complicated at this point. So getting them into a digital format is, particularly for just card games, like it's a 5 or 10 minute process once I've got the art assets. We've talked about this in other places, I think, but for me, I've somewhat unexpectedly realized that playtesting feels like the heart of game design. It's like, yes, there's creating something, but where the work happens to some extent feels like in the playtest. And so the more I can kind of iterate through my design is directly tied to how much I can get feedback from a playtest. And so, like, if I'm only playtesting at most once a month, and even with the group that I have now, particularly, we've been getting a slightly bigger, like, don't get me wrong, the in-person groups and the in-person playtests definitely seem to be much more valuable for whatever reason than the online ones. I just seem to get better feedback. I don't know. But if I was only doing that once a month, and even then sometimes where I might bring the game, but there might be some other new people that you want to give space to so that you're not hogging the available time in playtests. That also means that not every month even that I might get to it. It just would be such a slow cycle that doing an online playtest is kind of almost a requirement, I think, for me. And so I spend a lot of time trying to find, now to be fair, the worst part about my access to that capacity is that a lot of the other groups that do playtesting that I found are mostly either North American or European centric. And so the timing of those is quite bad. I think I've got them in my calendar now, but like half of them are at like 4 a.m. in the morning or 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm just like,
Are you in the New Zealand group? There's a New Zealand one that meets, and they do playtesting.
I probably haven't. I probably need to join that one because I actually through another event met a couple of New Zealand designers, and they were really fun to connect with. But I don't know how much they actually also joined the Australian ones. But
I don't know either, but I know that I'm in one of the Discords for the New Zealand ones because back in 2021, I tried doing the online incubator and TGJ wasn't running theirs at the time, but Incubator was. And so I joined the New Zealand one, but then I discovered that I just was never available at the time, so they were doing it. So, but I'm still in the Discord and see when they post and stuff. So they seem pretty active. And so I still, yeah, for me, that's why when I moved to Brisbane this time, I really made a big concerted effort for myself to kind of work through some of my social anxiety stuff. And I now go to two normal game groups. So one's a fortnightly group and one's a weekly group. And they're public groups. They're not at like anyone's house or anything. And they've been invaluable both just to make friends, but also to play test games. And then, like I said, there's these two other monthly events that are happening at two different places. So that's also been really good, although I haven't quite got to every single one of them because life happens. So I guess what I'm saying is, Ryan, if you want it to happen, just start a local playtesting group and
Believe it or
see
not,
what happens.
I'm pretty. I feel like I'm inching closer and closer to that as it being a reality. But
Yeah,
that's also partly my like I've started other groups, not game design groups, but yeah, like in other aspects of my life, I've started numerous communities, so I understand how to do it. It's
cool.
just getting the impetus to do it.
Yeah, and look, if it doesn't work in Sydney, don't. It's so Sydney. So I talked to so many people who tried starting game design playtesting groups in Sydney, and it just failed to get people like coming regularly. So Sydney is a bit of a conundrum, I think, in regards to that. But the online groups, yeah, seem obviously they're working for you, and they're working for heaps of people.
I'm still kind of curious to explore this idea around getting these playtests, what we're talking about online. Most of them, they're other game designers that you're getting this feedback from. Whereas I know going to an event like PAX or some of the other ones, you're more likely to get non-designer feedback. I'm curious if there is a different approach to that, or particularly some of the other elements, like a lot of the advice that people talk about for other game designers is that like essentially from day one, you should start trying to build a community. So I also don't know if I should be pushing to try to build up a mailing list or collect people's information. And that might be, if you get those people that are like, hey, where can I buy this? I'm like, well, please sign this and I'll tell you when it's available. I'm not sure how much of that kind of stuff or even how polished the game should be before you kind of bring it to these kind of events.
I think on the question about the different approach with when you're testing with game designers compared to testing with general public, I definitely think a key difference, it's not the key difference, but a key difference is that because game designers know the language of game design, obviously, and understand what you're trying to achieve through play testing, more inclined to be cognizant of the type of feedback that's going to be helpful. So not necessarily jumping straight to a solution to a problem, but like delving into here's where you might have a balancing issue, or perhaps it's playing a bit slowly, or or your narrative arc is taking too long to reach its conclusion or something like that. Whereas the general public doesn't have that language to understand that. So they're more inclined to say, you should make it so it ends sooner, or when the solution might actually be injecting more money so that it goes faster. There's various solutions, whereas a general sort of punter is more likely to just tell you or be like, yeah, no, it's good, or yeah, I like it, or I don't like it. But where they do actually have suggestions, it's often straight to what they think you should do rather than what the problem is to be solved. So, and I think it's a good thing to keep in mind whenever you're play testing, and I certainly try to, is to not take each individual piece of feedback on its own, but to collate it all together and then tease out, okay, what are the actual issues that these suggestions are all trying to address, to find the core things. But I think that's even more important when you're testing with the public. You've got to sort of tease out the useful information out of sort of the general results the feedback that you get.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I agree with everything Tegan said and echo it. When I'm playtesting with non-designers, usually I'm really just doing that observational playtesting where I'm not really one of the things I'm not good at is I tend to play the games because often we don't have the right play account, and so I need to play, and that always will skew the playtest because people will look to me as someone who knows the game and they'll kind of take cues from whatever I'm doing as, oh, okay, that's how it should be done, when I might just be doing a weird strategy or not playing optimally, I'm just doing something. And also, as you probably know, while you're playtesting, well, at least for me, I'm only putting like a small percentage of my brain into actually playing the game, and most of my brain is on observing what's happening. So I absolutely don't play optimally when I'm doing that. Not because I'm trying to give them a better, like I'm not altruistic and trying to give them a easier play, but it's more that I'm double thinking everything and going, oh, they're really hesitating on that part, or they keep having to read this text, like pick up that card and double check it like every 5 seconds, what's going on with that, or or they've every single time they do the wrong thing. Like I've told them the action and they keep doing it wrong. So I think for me that's the key difference. Whereas with designers, there's probably they're more likely to give feedback at all or want to give feedback. And what Tegan said is true. I get so many non-designers who they don't have feedback. Like literally, they're just like, "Oh yeah, that was fun," or "Oh, didn't really like it," And that's where they're going to go with it. And so you're just kind of going to roll with that.
Yeah. The other part of your question feeds into it as well. I think the one about how polished does your prototype need to be? Because I think that also is a key difference between those audiences. Game designers are more able to see through the pencil and paper version to what is the actual core design of the game and still be keen to play. Whereas if you're playing with the public, the more polished and pretty it looks, the more people will be interested to play in the first place, and the more that they'll be engaging with. If they do give feedback, it'll more likely to be about the gameplay than just about it's this bit was hard to tell because you've written it in pencil, or your colors need to be better differentiated, or things that's not necessarily the feedback you're looking for on those really early prototypes.
And are you thinking about some of the future marketing or future commercialization of your game at this when you bring it to a thing like this, and how much are you kind of pushing that side of things versus? Yeah, I'm just curious.
So for me, depending on how you're approaching, in terms of getting a mailing list and stuff, I'm terrible at that. I have thought recently, now that I'm doing more testing with like at non-game design events where people are saying, "Oh, how can I keep up to date?" I am thinking I do need to get something, whether it's a Facebook page that they can just like, or a mailing list, or something. So that is definitely something I need to do. In terms of though thinking about the marketing, I'm more using it as free market research where I'm just like, oh, how do these people respond to the components? Like, and for my current version of For God's Sake, I've got these really pretty crystals in there, which are actually just fish tank supplies, but everyone thinks they're way more special than that. So they do definitely get stuck on those aesthetics a lot. But that also then does tie in with the marketing for me, because then I am thinking, oh, okay, these components that I used to think were really critical, so many people don't care about them anymore, so I can change it.
Is that something, Tegan, you mentioned that you're also planning on pitching to some publishers. Is that the kind of stuff, I guess my thought process is, if you're going to be self-publishing, then being able to have a list of people to sell to in the future is important. I don't know how much if there's similar things that you think about when you try to pitch to a publisher.
I think, and because I definitely don't have an interest in self-publishing, I already have a lot of things going on in my life to get, without having to get the 10 extra jobs that it is to actually do all the different components that are involved in self-publishing. So pitching is definitely the avenue I want to go. And I think they do say when you're pitching, if you can make a case that, yes, I've got already 400 followers, that come with this design, then that probably plays well into it. But for me, I'm definitely focusing on the pitching side. So the game that I'm actually showcasing at Collaboratory was my first board game design, and it was one that I just wasn't conceiving anything to do with what's involved in actually manufacturing at the time when I designed it. And the main feedback I've had from publishers has been on the materials cost. So I think that for me will be one of my key questions that I don't know how much the public will feed into that, but what are just some ideas of other ways you can envision pulling this game together that doesn't involve 120 discs and a 80 centimeter printed mat and things like that to try and scale it down. That's definitely a key question for me when I'm playtesting this design, is how could it be manufactured differently?
One of the questions that I heard someone else ask, and I've now adopted into my lexicon, is, so how much would you pay for this game?
Yeah.
If you were to buy this at the store, how much would you pay for it? And they might go, it's a $30 game. And then you're like, okay, cool. I have no idea how to make this for $30. Like, that's just,
exactly.
But if you keep getting feedback that says, oh, it's in this kind of price range or comparable to XYZ other games that are in that price range, then at least it gives you an idea about what a publisher is going to be dealing with as well if they're trying to bring it to market. So,
yeah, great. Can I ask one really quick last question of you guys? If you were gonna cosplay at PAX, what would you be going as? Go.
Oh, that's a really good question.
Tegan with the curveball question there, yeah. So the thing is, I would want to cosplay as someone who had an outfit that I already found comfortable to wear. I don't want complicated, and I am not committed to the artistry of cosplaying.
Which one? Go with like a Greek toga. I think that would be thematic for you and
To
work out
thematic
well.
to your game.
No. If we're going to go down that track, then no, what it actually should be is like a tour guide who takes people on a tour of like a Greek site. So you just got like a t-shirt on, like some touristy, like,
a little
Athens
vest.
t-shirt. Yeah, like a vest, maybe a little backpack, like that might work. But it's not really,
little flag,
no one
be like,
would
"Come
know
on,
who that
guys."
is. I think if I was to cosplay someone, ignoring actual practicalities of making it happen, I don't know, like I discovered, which I didn't know through playing this game, there's like a robotic dinosaur who's in Marvel Comics, which I didn't know existed. So like that's amazing. But I also, my other kind of historically favorite game, the one I've played the most of in terms of video games, is Skyrim. So I could totally see doing some Skyrim kind of thing. I just don't know. Now I'd have to think about actually who or what from there. But if I was to invest in it and try and commit to it, I reckon that'd be something Skyrim related. Probably makes sense for me because I really like it. So yeah.
Okay.
I'm still struggling. I think the only thing else that comes to mind, and I don't think I could pull this off, just I don't have the aesthetic to pull it off, but I would just go back to one of my favorite comic book characters, which is Wolverine, which sounds so pedestrian and basic, but that would probably be my
really cool
go-to
character. It's fine.
Yeah, I didn't. Oh, I didn't say I didn't like him. I just said that I think.
I just discovered today that there is some fan rumor thing that people are saying that Daniel Radcliffe apparently he's in the TV show. Is it Miracle Workers?
Yeah,
he's buffed up quite a lot and is really like fit. And they're like, people are like speculating he could do a really good Wolverine. And I'm just like, that is so. And this video was very compelling and selling me on the concept. And I was just like, that is so crazy to think of Daniel Radcliffe as possible Wolverine. But we've had stranger things happen, so who knows?
Yeah.
Have Ryan Wolverine.
Yeah. But Tegan, you have to answer your own question. Hang on,
Yeah,
we can't let you get off that easy.
Well, I do own a Star Trek uniform, and so I've done Jadzia Dax before and did the little like makeup to do all the little markings down my thing. But I also now own some Vulcaneers, so if I was going to do one, I'd probably I might chuck it in my bag and we'll see on the Sunday. Do a generic Vulcan in Star Trek uniform, Voyager uniform.
Oh, that's so good.
If I could do the Janeway hair, I'd love to be Janeway. She's my favourite.
I can see you can pull that off.
The beehive happening.
Oh, now you got me thinking about all the Star Trek characters I like, and then I've also been enjoying the Foundation series on Apple TV, which is based on that as well. I've been loving that, and there's just so many things. Tegan, but no board game related ones, unfortunately for me. Maybe just a giant dice. Just like a cardboard box painted with some dots. Done.
little Pips fries.
Pips fries, yeah. All right, well, we might as well wrap this up because it's been going for a while. So thank you very much, Ryan and Tegan, for being on this episode. For anyone who does want to follow along, we do have an email address, which is just materialisepod, so materialisepod@gmail.com. So if you have any thoughts or questions or any feedback on what you've heard today, please send us an email. We also have a YouTube channel which is using the Materialise Pod link as well. So you can search for that. If you find it, leave me a message and tell me what you think. I'm open to that. Anyway, thank you everyone, and thank you Ryan and Tegan again.
Thanks, Eris. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, everybody.